is the workshop on how to make a podcast, and the paper that you have that's been handed out to you is sort of a summary of our project. In case I forget to say something, or when the kids forget to say something, you'll at least have it on paper so you can look back at it. Some of the technical stuff is in the paper and can be helpful, because once you find the right spot, it becomes very easy. But if you don't find the right spot, it's a challenge. My name is Joe Rivers. I'm from Brattleboro area middle school, and we have Chloe and Lauren and Alex with us. And together with a bunch of other kids, we do a recording which ends up being played on the local radio station in town, and also goes out onto the internet as a podcast. And we do that in conjunction with the Brattleboro Historical Society, and the radio station is WKBT. We started this a couple years ago, and as a result of doing that, last year sometime, Brattleboro Savings and Loan heard some of our podcasts, and they've chosen to sponsor us, and so they gave us some money, which allowed us to buy this fancy looking microphone, and also allowed us to buy some equipment for the Brattleboro Historical Society, some new technology, and upgrade some of the things that go on there. So this is a collaborative venture between the Historical Society and initially the radio station and Brattleboro area middle school. What I thought we'd do is just play a short one so you can hear what it sounds like. These guys, this group has just been doing this for a couple weeks. We've been doing it as a school for a couple years. We loop, and so I just finished a 7th and 8th grade group, which has done most of the podcasts and the radio show. In this group, because we see them every other day for a quarter, they've been with me since the change of quarters every other day. So I think you guys, Lauren and Chloe, have actually done a recording so far, and Alex has done research but hasn't done one yet. So we'll show you one of those as the morning proceeds here. But we wanted you to hear at least part of it. Oh, it's not anywhere near loud.
It's time for Brattleboro History, brought to you by the Brattleboro Historical Society.
15 years ago, two neighbors in Dummerston had a conversation about farming in Vermont. From that conversation, the Strolling of the Heifers parade was born. Dwight Miller was a 6th-generation farmer living next to Orly Munzing, a retired teacher. They talked about how people didn't seem connected to the farmers who produced their food, and Dwight Miller suggested that Orly Munzing organize an event to honor the local producers of food in the greater Brattleboro area.
Orly Munzing spoke to other friends and came up with the idea of sponsoring a slower, family-friendly female version of the Running with the Bulls practice in Spain every year. Instead of running bulls through the street of Brattleboro, she suggested having young female cows, heifers, walk slowly up Main Street as a way to bring attention to local farmers and locally produced food.
The idea was accepted by local business and farmers, and the first Strolling of the Heifers took place in June of 2002. Orly Munzing was invited to speak on ABC's Good Morning America and was interviewed by the Boston Globe newspaper. The first Strolling of the Heifers parade attracted 10,000 people.
As time has gone on, the Strolling of the Heifers have become a weekend-long celebration of the local foods movement, with many events scheduled during the dairy month of June. The parades have drawn up to 50,000 people to Brattleboro, and the positive attention has led to year-round programs that focus on sustainable agriculture, healthy living, and sustainable human-scale community. Strolling of the Heifers has done a great job of finding sponsors who help promote the message of supporting local farming and farmers. Dwight Miller's original message that people needed to know how hard local farmers worked and how connected they were to their communities has certainly been emphasized by the people who continue to organize the stroll.
My name is Sarah. I've been in the parade and enjoyed the other features. When I was there, I noticed that people put in a lot of time and effort. There were lots of enjoyable and interesting things to try and see. Another thing I noticed was it was very hot and crowded. My experience was amazing, and I plan on going in further years.
It was 15 years ago that a few neighbors came up with a unique way to honor the agricultural community of our area, and the Strolling of the Heifers has continued to grow and contribute to the one and only Brattleboro ever since. We'd like to thank Chloe, Lauren, Sarah, and Paige for researching and reading This Week in Brattleboro History.
Okay, so that's one of the podcasts. We've done about 110 of them over the last couple of years. We do one every week, and it started. We'll go through the slideshow here, and we'll try to walk you through how it works. We've already done that. Those are some of the kids recording this year, last couple weeks ago. So it started with Chris Lenoir, who is a radio personality on WKVT. He went to we have, the Brattleboro Historical Society has a little museum in town on Main Street, and he walked through that one day, and he said, well, this is interesting. Brattleboro does have some history, and so he contacted the Historical Society, and Bill and I are members of the Historical Society.
Joe's the president of the Brattleboro Historical Society.
So he contacted the Historical Society, and at the time I was a new member of it, and they said, would you like to do a weekly radio show? And we said, well, yeah, sure, we'll give it a try. And so we started doing it a couple summers ago, and then when school started up, offered it to the kids and said, would you like to do that? And some of the, again, through our multi-tiered system of support, we see most of the kids during 40-minute blocks every day. And so it's enrichment and remediation. And so for those kids who are not scheduled for remediation, this is an enrichment opportunity. And the way it works in class is that we don't, no one's forced to do it, although I do put some pressure on some people. But the choices are you can read quietly or you can work on the show for 40 minutes a day. You can opt in at whatever level you want. You can just be a researcher, like so far that's what Alex has done. And you can only do that if you want, or you can just be last loop we had a guy who had a great voice. He didn't like doing the research, but he had a radio voice. So he did the readings for us. And so we try to make it as organic as possible and not force people to do things. So Chris came up with the idea, and WKVT's done it. We started it as a radio show. We've done, like I said, 110 of those. And then as we started doing that, Bill and another person on the Historical Society board, Reggie Martell, Reggie is a whiz with computers and things. And so they suggested that we turn it into a podcast. And the thing about a podcast is that it can, once it goes out, it's out forever. And so with the radio show, it plays 7:20 in the morning on Thursdays, and then they rebroadcast it on Saturday, but then it's done. You know, you either hear it or you don't. But with the podcast, you can have access to it online at any time. And so it's really broadened itself as time has gone on. You know, all the academic reasons why we do it. But, you know, that's not. So I should just say, Tarrant, the Tarrant Institute, you might have heard of those folks. We've partnered with them. Our school has partnered with Tarrant Institute, and they have supported this idea. And so they're the ones that helped make these slides and put the educational jargon in. And here's some of the transferable skills, but really what we're trying to do is we're trying to get kids interested in where they're from and work together and collaborate and do things that are authentic and that can can last. I mean, one of the things we're trying to do right now, and what we are doing is we're cataloging all these things, and at this point, because this is a new loop of kids, 7th graders are actually using the work that last loop did and citing that as information as they're doing research projects now. And so the title of this is Making History, and that's what the kids in the last loop did. They recorded and researched history of our town, our area. And now that information is being used as a source and cited by the kids who are doing research projects in this next group about the same or similar topics. So they're actually being historians as they do this process. Alex.
Hi guys, I'm Alex, and today I am going to share with you how we find our research topics and how we find information on them. So personally, I think you should find a topic that you like or have experienced, and then ways you could find information on them is email people who know stuff and do stuff with what you're researching, and look at websites, internet, and maybe even use some of your own knowledge to help.
So what topic are you working on presently?
Well, I am working on Little League right now, Brattleboro Little League, because I just got done with a Little League season. That was pretty cool, so I find interest in baseball, so I am working on that.
Good, thanks. So some of the topics up here, out in West Brattleboro, where there's now an RV park, back in the 50s and 60s, there was a stock car racetrack. And it turns out that the bookkeeper in our high school grew up right next to that stock car racetrack. And so we were able to interview her and hear the stories of what it was like when that was an oval that had all these funny-looking cars racing around it. That's Richard Hamilton, who is a World War II veteran, and we interviewed him a while ago. He lives in our area. H.P. Lovecraft, I don't know if any of you, was like one of the precursors of science fiction books and stories. And that beat-up old barn there, one of our kids in the last group lives right next to it, and found this on the Brattleboro Historical Society website, this picture, and said, why is this beat-up old barn next to where I live? Why is it online?
Slide, Alex, do you do it just during the class time, or do you do it during other periods of time?
Just do research on it, email people, and try to find more information, so I can get it done a little quicker and do other stuff.
Well, the one we're going to do today is about Ethan Allen. And so, Alex, remember the other day, we were in the room, and so what we do is they'll explain it. I don't want to tell those. We're going to skip by this stuff. All right. Lauren?
Hi, my name's Lauren, and I'm going to talk about how we share Google Docs so we can write down notes on them about our research. So first we just make a doc and we can title it, and then we email it to whoever is researching on the same topic as you, so they can all add information. And then when it's done, we send it to Mr. Rivers so we can finalize it into a script. Yeah, he types those for us, and then we read them into the microphone.
So this is a shared Google Doc from an earlier show. It was about the SD Organ Company and Fats Waller, who was a jazz musician who played an SD organ back in the early 1900s for some of the first recordings that happened. And so the kids go online and they find what they can, and you can see they find something and then they cut and paste it, or they write it in their own words and then they say where they got it from. And this ended up being about 6 pages long. And when they feel like they've gotten to a point where they've gathered enough information, then we go forward, and I end up writing the script. And that's what we're going to talk about next.
You all have devices that you're using?
Yeah, we do it on our Chromebooks.
The school provides the Chromebooks?
Yeah.
Yes, we're a one-to-one, what do they say?
One-on-one.
Yeah.
Middle school and high school.
One of them.
Chloe?
Hi guys, I'm Chloe and I'm going to be talking about how we process editing. So after we are done with we're finding a topic, then we write about it. And then Mr. Rivers goes and writes a script about it. And then before we go on the mic, we edit it in our version because Mr. Rivers likes to use big fancy words that we don't. And we want to make sure everyone understands what's happening in the script and we understand what's going on. And then when we're going on the mic, if we mess up afterwards, like if we say a word wrong or we skip a line, we just go back and restart. And then also, if we mess up, he'll just edit out and make it all nice.
Thanks, Chloe.
Okay,
so like Lloyd was saying, if we mess up, then we just restart normally from the beginning of the sentence or the beginning of the paragraph. And then Mr. Rivers on his laptop can cut out the parts that we messed up. That's it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I'll edit that part out.
And so Audacity is the program that we use to do the editing, and it's a free program. Again, all this is on that paper that you got. So what a message that we want to make clear, and Bill probably talked about this better than I could, but a message we want to make clear is that you don't need anything to do this. Really what you need, the only thing you need is a phone, and one of those iPhones. You can record the kids on your iPhone. You can do the editing right there, and then what we do is we upload it into Google Drive, and but it all can be done with just that amount of equipment. We do have other things. Some of the things we have is because I'm not technologically advanced, and so I don't know how to use a phone other than to call people on it, really. But and so I know about recorders. You know, that's the first thing that we used was one of those handheld recording devices that you can then plug into a computer and then load it in that way. That costs about $40, and you can, if you have that, you can do everything. And SoundCloud, which is also talked about on there, you just upload it. SoundCloud is also free, and you upload it to SoundCloud, and SoundCloud then sends whatever you've recorded to iTunes, and then what happens for us is that we also load it onto other devices, or other homes, like the Brattleboro Historical Society Facebook page, and the local ibrattleboro.com, which is a news site. Brattleboro Savings and Loan, because they sponsor us, they have it on their website. So it goes out on the internet in all those different ways, but it stays at SoundCloud forever. So I know about recorders, that's the first thing that we used was one of those handheld, and so I don't know how to use the phone other than to call people. So this is Bill showing us that you just recorded it and you can make it happen. Thanks. This is our SoundCloud page that, again, SoundCloud's free, and you load it into that, and they automatically then share it to iTunes. And once iTunes started loading podcasts and allowing people to subscribe, it sort of took off as its own thing. And they're popular to a generation not of my age, but to others. And so it makes this information available to people who wouldn't access it otherwise.
Guys, are you able to track the hits that you get from people outside of Vermont that are accessing your podcast? Do you have like a number counter, and how far and wide, away from Brattleboro are people accessing your content?
I can tell you, these guys don't know. We don't go that way for that, but Reggie Martello, who does the stuff for us for the historical site, he does have access, and I think Bill has access to it as well. And we know we have listeners in Europe, because at one point Reggie was asking us if we knew anybody in the Netherlands, and we didn't know we knew anybody in the Netherlands. We had a woman come into the historical society the other day who lives in California, who was born in Brattleboro, and she was visiting back, and she could tell us all the stories that we had told over the last year and a half, because she listens out there. So we do know that there are listeners around. I think this does tell you that we have 29 followers here, and that means people have registered with SoundCloud to directly get it.
Yeah.
iTunes has another list of followers. Brattleboro has another list of followers. So if you add all that up, it's in the hundreds probably.
Well, could I ask the students then, does this change your perspective when you're doing your research, knowing that potentially people from, Timbuktu could be listening to it, or are you just, is that not really kind of coming to your...
Normally I don't think about it directly. I don't really think wow, somebody in Europe could be listening to this. So I don't really think about it when we're researching.
I don't personally, I don't think about it. I just think about if I could listen to it, anyone, and if you have SoundCloud or podcasts or iTunes, you can listen to it. So it really depends on who's interested into it.
Could I ask you guys about sort of that?
Sorry, do you want to...
Well, I was going to say that it kind of does affect me a little way, makes me want to push myself to make it a little better, so people
Yeah.
Well, he's the one that went off and redid all our Ethan Allen notes the other day on his own. And then, we opened up the next day we opened up the doc, and, the girls were saying, who did all this? And I was like, well, I did. So I think people are motivated differently. And for Alex, I think there is an idea there that he wants it to look good or sound good.
So as a project as a whole, can you comment on sort of the learning process, the feeling you had? Does this feel like a different kind of learning experience? Could you comment on what it's like, what it's been for you?
In my opinion, I think it's really cool that it can go on the radio and everyone that's in the community or around us can listen to it. And it's kind of interesting, something we're in school, not everyone that went to school learned what we do personally, but then it's cool what our parents ask me every day, how was school today? And I'm like, it was good, and they're like, well, what did you do? And then you can listen on the radio to see what I did.
So maybe they'll listen on Saturday.
All right, and so this, so we have a paper up here. If you want to receive this, because it has some links on it, you can just write your email as this is over with. We want to make sure people that want to have access to this can. This is SoundCloud itself, like I was saying. It's easy. This hopefully is going to come up, and it walks you right through the whole process of how to start with a podcast and how you can create your own channel eventually, sort of like we've done. And again, it's all free. There isn't any cost. You can upgrade if you'd like, but you don't need to.
I'm just curious, from a student perspective and Joe, from your perspective, how long does it take to put together, just say, one episode from research to final posting? In terms of what you guys do for your part, and then Joe for in terms of how long does it take to edit an episode and punch up a script?
Well, for researching, normally it takes maybe 2 or
like these classes to get all of like the notes down, and then we send it to Mr. Rivers. And once we get the script back, that doesn't take very long because we divvy up all of the paragraphs, so we each have like our own paragraphs to read. So it really.
It usually takes about a week, because first we have to figure out what we want to do, and then we have to find research and what we want to, like, how we're going to put it all together. And then we start writing in a doc, and then we send it to Mr. Rivers, and then we edit it and put it on the show. And it's about the day's worth of it, so it's just a week.
You need that to put together, like, and we're talking like that's like 4 to 7 minute sort of episodes.
Yeah.
So for the radio, we do 4-minute episodes.
Okay.
And then what we started to do with the podcast is it's a freer format. The radio says they want between 3 and 4 minutes. But when we do interviews, like Alex is actually trying to set up an interview now to interview some of the guys who started the Little League, or know the people who started the Little League in 1952. And so when we interview those folks, that podcast might end up being 10 or 12 minutes. We've had podcasts that have gone about 20 minutes, about the longest one we've gone with, which has been an interview with somebody. It hasn't been the kids talking for 20 minutes. It's been interviewing folks that have something to do with our community.
Alex, the hard part is going to be, I would think, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but if Little League started in 1952, that's over 60 years ago. How many of those folks that started it in Brattleboro are still alive?
What we tried to do was pick a topic that had some relevance to this Burlington area and also to Brattleboro. And what we started chasing down was this fellow, Ethan Allen. And Ethan Allen has his homestead here and settled in this area eventually. His history with the Brattleboro area is very different than his history with much of the state. Brattleboro was an area that was not all that interested in signing up with Vermont. And so we're going to read that script. We're going to go through, so our process is we read through this script without doing any recording. And as we read through it that first time, the kids critique me basically and say, this, we got to cut this out, this word doesn't make sense, what are you trying to say, that sort of thing. And then once we've gone through that and we decide who's going to read which paragraphs, then we actually do the recording, which we want to show you that. And there won't be time to show you the editing process, but the editing process is just going back through and cutting out all the ums and the stutters and the pauses. I'm from Vermont, speak real slow, and some people speak too fast, and so we try to get it within that 4 minutes as we can. So you guys ready? So this is when you can read through that paper if you haven't already, if you're thinking for something to do. All right, you ready to go through it all?
Yeah.
All right. We're going to read through it. Did you decide who's going to do what?
Yeah.
All right, I wanted that next to the last one, Bob. We've already done this once at school, so this is our second edit. They butchered me on the first one. But it was good. It was good.
Is this your guys' first live recording session?
With this group. We had one last year with a different group.
Well, I just mean live in terms of having a studio audience.
Yeah. Who, hiss, whatever you want to do. So you got, I said I wanted the next to last one. And the script is in the paper that you have as well. All right.
It was 250 years ago this week that the Burling family requested the New York colonial government recognize the New Hampshire Grant townships of Charlotte, Colchester, Jericho, Huntington, Essex, and Fairfax.
In the 1760s, the Burling family had purchased the land from the New Hampshire government, Benning Wentworth. The Burlings were land speculators and had hoped to make money by reselling the land to others who were interested in settling in the recently established New Hampshire Grants.
Unfortunately for the Burlings, the King of England ruled that New Hampshire did not have the right to sell any land west of the Connecticut River. So the Burlings were worried that their large land investments were illegal and worthless. The Burlings sent representatives to England in hope of convincing the king that he should reconsider and recognize the New Hampshire Grant land titles.
However, the king did not agree with the Burlings. This meant it was unclear as to who really owned the land east of Lake Champlain and west of the Connecticut River. Was the land New York's or New Hampshire's to sell?
All right, who's got this next part?
Yes.
Can we skip it? Because this part we've already done the editing on, but for time. Oh, when we get down, the next paragraph is the one we haven't edited yet. So can we do that one? Yeah, we're going to do it. For time, I want to make sure we get through it.
As the years went on and it still wasn't clear whether New York or New Hampshire governments were in control of the grants, the Allens promoted the idea of the grants becoming an independent republic. This way, the land claimed by the Allens would be legal, recognized, and it would be possible for them to make a profit from their land deal with the Burlings.
What do you guys think about that?
It's okay.
You all right?
Yeah.
All right. I got the next one. In support of the Allens' desire for independence, in 1777, representatives of many of the New Hampshire grant towns voted to create the independent state of Vermont. Brattleboro did not send a representative to this meeting. In fact, at the next Brattleboro town meeting, 165 out of 166 attendees voted to not recognize the newly formed state of Vermont. Vermont's southeast corner did not want to join the newly formed republic. Instead, many of the residents felt a strong loyalty to New York. Did that make clear?
Yeah. Conflict between the newly formed Vermont government and Brattleboro continued. In 1779, Ethan Allen arrived in Brattleboro area with hundreds of Vermont militia and arrested, intimidated, and exiled residents opposed to the Vermont government.
Well, so Lauren, what do you think about those words?
I don't like military.
Militia?
Yeah.
I think we've got to stick with it. How else do we say it? Well, what do you think?
Describe what the militia is.
That's more
No,
words.
it's okay. I just read it out so I can understand it.
Militia? So it's more pronunciation, it's not. Now, are you okay with arrested, intimidated, and exiled?
Yeah.
All right.
Again, in 1782, both Ethan and Ida Allen brought the militia back to Brattleboro area to combat those who continued to oppose the Vermont government. The Allens banished the opponents of Vermont and forced them to move across the Connecticut River to New Hampshire. The Allens threatened to chop their heads off as they returned. The brothers then led the Vermont militia while they destroyed many local houses and farms, confiscated the property, and were not loyal to Vermont and threatened to burn the whole nation to the ground if the residents did not peacefully submit to the authority of Vermont.
What do you think about that? That's
Maybe-
a long, that last sentence.
Maybe we don't need if the residents did not peacefully, if we just did burn the legion to the ground, or would that not be?
How about if we took out, you know where it says confiscated property? How about if we just said confiscated property? If we got rid of the, and then confiscated property, comma, and then forget the of those not loyal to Vermont, because isn't that already, I don't know, it's already kind of assumed, isn't it? in that?
So we're not doing the last sentence?
Yeah, so cross out the, of those not loyal. Just go with a comma after property.
Wait, all of those?
Is that all right? That'll save us. That shortens that sentence. I like that last part though, because that's almost a straight quote. The part that says, did not peacefully submit to the authority of Vermont. Those are some of Ethan Allen's words. Well, it's not really a direct quote, but it's the flavor of what he was saying. Yeah.
In the courts and with the militia, the Allens intimidated Vermont's southeastern residents for over a decade before Brattleboro and Guilford finally chose to join the Republic in 1784. By that time, many of the Vermont opponents had been been bullied into leaving or had given into the persecution of the Vermont court system.
People were complicated. The Allens are celebrated as Vermont independence heroes, but they were also very intimidating to those who opposed them. One person's hero can be another person's bully. We'd like to thank Lauren, Alex, and Chloe for researching and reading this week in Brattleboro history. And that line about one person's hero can be another person's bully, that was basically Alex the other day when we were going through this, and he said, well, this guy sounds a little bit like Christopher Columbus. And well, maybe. I don't think it was that extreme. You know, we don't read that he did the atrocities that Columbus has been accused of, but that idea of being a strong man, and that strong man person in history, it depends on whose side you're on as to whether that strong man is a hero or a villain. And so that sort of, Alex came up with that, so we wanted to make sure we fit it in there. And Chloe did most of the, cutting out all my big words, which was good. So I'm going to turn this off because it hums, and we're actually going to do the recording. Pardon? I think we, no, the speakers don't matter. I'm going to turn them off. Let's turn that off. All right, who's first? So, yeah, one of the things is, this is only the second or third time these kids have done it. So, one of the things you got to remember is that when you're reading, as you come to the end of a sentence, you're fade. Some of you are fading, and so it's like when you're racing in track and you want to get to the finish line. You got to run all the way through the finish line with your sentences. Okay, get all the way to the end before you. Please don't. We good? Yes. That thing's still on. I don't know how long it's going to take.
Joe, if we're turning the pages, we got to pick it up?
No.
No.
We should be good for that. I'm just waiting for that to stop humming so we can do it.
It's like you, Joe, after somebody blocks your shot, it has to cool down a little bit.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
It's going to have to reach an internal temperature before it shuts off.
Yeah, I know, you're right.
But this looks like it's really intensive of your time. How many of these teams of talented people do you manage over the course of a week?
2.
Okay.
So there's a purple day and a white day. And so I get this group on one day and then another group. And so, again, some kids choose to do it, some kids choose not to. It's trying to force them to do this doesn't work.
Like, what percentage of kids choose to do it? I mean, are we talking 50% of the kids, or is it a minority of kids who?
Yeah. It depends. Right now, we're still in the growing phase, and so I'd say about, with this group of 7th graders, it might be about half the kids who have a chance to do it are choosing to at some level. With the last group, as time went on, that builds as they find that, and again, it's whether you're interested in something or not. The kid who drove by H.P. Lovecraft's barn every day didn't really get interested until he saw that. Then that was something he got after. So, all right, we're going to try it. Ready?
It was 250 years ago this week that the Burlington family requested the New York colonial government recognize the New Hampshire Grant townships of Charlotte, Colchester, Chirico, Huntington, Essex, and Fairfax.
In the 1760s, the Burling family had purchased the land from New Hampshire Governor Benny Wentworth. The Burlings were land speculators and hoped to make money by reselling the land to others who were interested in settling in the recently established New Hampshire Grants.
Unfortunately for the Burlings, the King of England ruled that New Hampshire did not have the right to sell any land west of the Connecticut River. So the Burlings were worried that their large investment were illegal and worthless. The Burlings sent representatives to England in hope.
To England.
The Burlington sent representatives to England in hopes of convincing the king that he should reconsider and recognize the New Hampshire Grant land titles.
However, the king did not agree with the Burlings. This meant it was unclear to who really owned the land east of the...
Okay, Lauren, you skipped a word there.
Should I start from this?
Just start with this now.
This meant it was unclear as to who really owned the land east of Champlain, the land east of Lake Champlain, and west of the Connecticut River. Was the land New York's or New Hampshire's to sell?
The Burlings were worried that they would lose the thousands of acres they had purchased from New Hampshire. Luckily for the Burlings, in 1772, the Allen family, led by Ethan and Ira Allen, offered to purchase about 40,000 acres of land from the Burlings, and the Burlings agreed to sell. The Allens had purchased Burlings land when it was not clear that they had legal right to sell it. In 1772, Ethan and Ira Allen were leading the Vermont independence movement, and they also became sketchy land speculators in the northwestern part of the Grants.
Sketchy was Chloe's word.
As the years went on and it still wasn't clear whether New York or New Hampshire governments were in control of the Grants, the Allens promoted the idea of the Grants becoming an independent republic. This way, the land claimed by the Allens would be legally recognized, and it would be possible for them to make a profit for their land deal with the Burlings.
Can you do that last sentence again? That starts with this way.
This way, the land claimed by the Allens would be legally recognized, and it would be possible for them to make a profit from their land deal with the Burlings.
In support of the Allens' desire for independence, in 1777, representatives of many of the New Hampshire grant towns voted to create the independent state of Vermont. Brattleboro did not send a representative to this meeting. In fact, at the next Brattleboro town meeting, 165 out of 166 attendees voted to not recognize the newly formed state of Vermont. Vermont's southeast corner did not want to join the newly formed republic. Instead, many of the residents felt a strong loyalty to New York.
Conflict between the newly formed Vermont government and Brattleboro continued. In 1777, Ethan Allen.
What year?
In 1779, Ethan Allen arrived in Brattleboro. In 1779, Ethan Allen arrived in the Brattleboro area with hundreds of Vermont militia and arrested, intimidated, and exiled residents opposed to the Vermont government.
Again, in 1782, both Ethan and Ira Allen led the militia back to the Brattleboro area to combat those who continued to oppose the Vermont government. The Allens banished the opponents of Vermont and forced them to move across the Connecticut River to New Hampshire. The Allens threatened to chop off their heads if they returned. The brothers led. The Allens banished the opponents of Vermont and forced them to move across the Connecticut River to New Hampshire. The Allens threatened to chop off their heads if they returned. The brothers led the Vermont militia while they destroyed many local houses and farms, confiscated and threatened to burn the whole region to the ground if the residents did not peacefully submit the authority of Vermont.
In the courts and the with the militia, the Allens intimidated Vermont's southeastern residents for over a decade before Brattleboro and Guilford finally chose to join the Republic in 1784. By that time, many of the Vermont opponents had been bullied into leaving or had given into the persecution of the Vermont court system.
People were complicated. The Allens are celebrated as Vermont independence heroes, but they were also very intimidating to those who oppose them. One person's hero can be another person's bully. We'd like to thank Lauren, Alex, and Chloe for researching and reading This Week in Brattleboro History. That's it. Every week. And so we do have, like right now, we have 3 different research projects going on. The kids are, Alex is doing a little bit, somebody else is doing